Thank you for coming to the final colloquium lecture of the spring 2006. And my name is Linda Vita. I'm the director of the Water Resources Center Archives, and we're sort of a major logistical sponsor of this series. Just a brief announcement. I'd like to ask how many people is this, if this is your first time attending the series? Oh, a lot. Okay. So in the back we have a sign-up sheet if you would like to be on an email list to receive announcements of future lectures, and we also have some brochures and things from the archives that have our phone number and various things, and I think we have some. No. Okay. And I also want to, before I introduce Professor Narasimhan, who will introduce our speaker, I just want to acknowledge Professor Narasimhan for all of his contributions to this colloquium series. He is retiring this semester, and today is the last day of classes, but he has agreed to stay on the colloquium committee, so that's wonderful news. And this whole series started about 6 years ago or 7 years ago with a conversation that we had in the library, and talking about ways to draw more attention to the Water Resources Center archives and the subject of water in California. So I hope you will help me thank Professor Narasimhan at this point for all of his contributions to the series. Thank you. And we do have something for you, Professor, but I didn't bring it. It's not quite ready, but we'll give it to you at a future event. So with that, then I'd like to introduce Professor Narasimhan.
Well, it has been a pleasure. This is one of those cases where the academic freedom of the university enables us to do something for ourselves without any bureaucracy or whatever. We just reach out to the various deans and say something spontaneous that we would like to do, and here it is. And we have been running this. It's kind of nice that we are running it through the archives, which is a library, which is in a sense secular. It is not engineering, it is not humanities, it's all of the above. So a colloquium like this, which looks at water in all its variations, it is nice that it is being sponsored and arranged through the library rather than any individual college. However, this colloquium has been supported very generously by several deans, the Dean of Law, Natural Resources, Letters and Science, Engineering, Landscape Architecture, then the division head of the Earth Sciences Division of the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, and the Groundwater Resources Association of California. Little bit of money here and there, and all of a sudden we have enough resources to do something just for the heck of it, for the students, for the faculty, and for the general public. And we have been running it with the help of a faculty committee. I have been chairing that committee all along. And now that I'm going to retire, I thought it would be nice for an active member to be the chair of the committee. And our next fearless leader will be Professor Michael Hanneman of Agricultural Resource Economics. He is a very busy person. He is unable to be here today. With that, it is my pleasure today to introduce today's speaker. California, amidst all the complaints that we can make about California not having a coherent groundwater policy or whatever, it is also true that California has a lot of local governments that have managed to run out of their own independence some extraordinary institutions for water which combine superb science and technology with public relations and public education. One that comes to mind is close to us, the Santa Clara Valley Water District. Another is the Orange County Water District. And today we have Roy Herndon, Chief Hydrogeologist of the Orange County Water District. It has many, many facets, but he is going to talk about today the necessity and the imperative for using recycled water imaginatively, and then conveying the message of recycled water to the non-water expert, which is to combine science and technology on the one hand and the people on the other is one of the greatest challenges we have in our modern society. And so he is in a wonderful position to address that, and he is going to talk about how they are trying to do that in Orange County Water District. Roy has got a bachelor's degree from a small college in Colorado College, I believe. And then he went to a very fine school, University of Arizona, Tucson, which has had for many decades, it had an outstanding hydrology program. He got his master's degree in hydrology from there. Then he worked a few years somewhere else, and then finally he landed in Orange County, and he has now been working there ever since. It's my pleasure to introduce Roy.
Thank you, Dari. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. I had a couple hours, got here early, and I had a chance to walk around the campus, and it's just a fantastic school. I really have not had a chance to spend any time here at Berkeley before. I've been stuck down in Orange County most of the time, but it's just a wonderful campus. You've got a creek running through it and redwoods, and I even got heckled by a guy with green hair as I'm wearing the tie, so I think he thought I was part of the establishment or something. So I was glad to be one of his props as I walked by, but anyway, a little taste of Berkeley. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, and I really jumped it when Nari called me and asked if I could come up and talk with you folks about what we do down in Orange County and our situation. A school with this reputation and a professor of Nari's background, how can you say no to that? It was an honor to be here. So yes, just as Nari said, we cover very technical issues, but most of our audience is not people with your level of expertise. It's people who have relatively no understanding of water. They just know it comes out of their tap, and they don't know a whole lot else. And depending on where you live, if you're down in what still is, I guess, generally fairly conservative Orange County, they don't want to do anything to raise water rates, you know, and don't raise taxes, and that you're just bad government people, and everything you do is very expensive and wasteful and so on. And so we have to overcome all kinds of things just to get them to listen to us. And it has to be done in a very simple, educational manner to get people to connect, and so that we can connect with people. And so what you're going to see today hopefully is educational, but it hopefully won't strain your brain with equations, because there aren't going to be any. And if I tried to do that with most of my audiences, they would go to sleep and they get upset, including our board of directors. So most of which are not water people. They're realtors, lawyers, business people. Those are the elected officials that you tend to have to deal with. So we're going to talk about the district first. Actually, first I'm going to talk about the water supply outlook in the state. We're going to cover the state. Then we'll kind of zoom down to Orange County Water District, or OCWD, and talk about what we do as an agency, because you got to build the picture to get down to why we're doing water recycling. And I'll mention seawater intrusion control, which is one of the driving reasons why we went to recycled water. And then our project, the groundwater replenishment system, which is the big sewage purification project that we have going on right now in construction. So we first have to cover the basics here. We got to talk about the acre foot, which is the best unit of measure ever devised. It's fully metric. No. It's exactly 3,790 cubic meters. Now, somebody probably rounded that off. It probably has a bunch of decimal places after that. But sorry, but that's the unit of measure that most of the people in California water use when they're dealing with large volumes of water. It's acre feet per year and acre feet, you know, in terms of volumes. So that's what we have to deal with. So I just want to make sure everybody knows what an acre foot is. Covers a football field under a foot of water. Paint the picture. Show the football field. People can think of a foot of water over that. That's how you get the message across to the people so they know what an acre-foot is. How much does it supply? About 2 families over a year. So talking about the California water situation, and I'm going to talk specifically here about southern coastal California here, the LA, Orange County, San Diego County area. They import or bring in from outside their area about 50% of their total water supply. So about half of all their water comes from someplace else. And it either comes in from the Colorado River Aqueduct, or it comes down from either the LA Owens Valley Aqueduct, or it comes down from the California Aqueduct from Northern California. So that's about 3 million acre-feet per year. Make sure you don't throw up acronyms up there and don't explain what they are. It goes right over people's heads. So if you're going to put acronyms on your presentations, explain them. By the way, 21 million acre-feet per year on average goes out San Francisco Bay through the Delta. Just to put into perspective how much water goes out versus how much water on average is brought in to Southern California. And obviously the whole Bay Delta issue is 10 lectures right there just to try to cover that issue, and I'm not going to touch it, mostly because I don't have a clue what's going on. Can only know so much. Water's too big an area to try to understand. As far as our future water supplies in the whole state, we can't assume that we're going to be getting more Northern California water because of the sensitivity, the environmental issues in the Bay Delta, which may be years and years before those are resolved. And if there's ever a happy medium, that will be tough to find. But we can't count on more water coming in from Northern California. I'm talking from Southern California's perspective. Also, the Colorado River water is basically been capped. There's the surplus Colorado River water that we used to be taking in Southern California has been capped, and it will be reduced by 25% by year 2016. So we're going to have a reduction in the amount of Colorado River water that we can bring in to Southern California. And so looking at our main water supplies diminishing, oh, and of course Los Angeles with their Owens Valley Aqueduct, they have tremendous environmental hurdles, and they're having to cut back their supplies into Los Angeles from the Owens Valley due to environmental issues, the dust issues at Owens Lake, Mono Lake having to be refilled, so their supplies are being cut back as well. That puts more pressure on other Southern California counties to try to come up with their own water supplies. The agency that brings in most of the water into Southern California as far as imported water is the big mighty Met, as they say. It's Metropolitan Water District. And they're the agency that owns and operates the Colorado River Aqueduct, and they are the one that we buy water from. When we want to buy imported water, we buy it from them, and other cities buy water from Metropolitan Water District. Looking at population growth, which is really the driver for increased water demand, it's growing like crazy here in California and Orange County. We've got a little over 30 million, maybe 33 million people in the state in 2000, and we're going up by 14 million, at least that's the projection, by 2030. And I remember doing reports back in the early 90s looking at year 2000, thinking, oh, year 2000, that's way out there. Or past 2000, we're looking at 2010. It's going to be here before we know it. And if these projections are anywhere on target, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that kind of water demand. In Orange County, I know it didn't work very well with this graph because the state has so many more people than the county, but we've got about 3 million people in Orange County, and we're going to add about 900,000 more in the next 20 years or 25 years, according to the projections. So quite a few people, they're all going to use water, and we got to figure out how we're going to deal with it. Besides the lack or the assumed lack of new water coming in from outside the state, part of that is because there aren't going to be, or we're assuming there aren't going to be massive new mega water projects like big aqueducts and things that were done back in the 40s and 50s and even back in the 30s and before. those big water projects are, because of the environmental issues and so on, probably won't happen again, at least not for the foreseeable future. And so we just can't count on that. We can't count on water being brought in from Northern California or icebergs being towed in from Alaska and these other things. Who knows? Someday it may happen, but we're not ready to just put our future, stake our future on those types of situations. So where is the water going to come from? It's going to come from more local and regional projects. Projects that are funded primarily by local agencies and or agencies working together to develop their own water supplies. Also, obviously more water efficiency all the time. You know, we're already, you know, a lot of people new homes all come with ultra low flush toilets. We call them the triple flush toilets, so they work, but no, they're getting better all the time. But the low flow shower heads and so on, all of that is happening. People's use of water has gone down per capita than it was, at least in Orange County, than it was back in 1990. We're using less water per person now than we were back in 1990. So habits are changing and water use is becoming more efficient, but it's not enough to make up the difference for all the future water demands. It's just conservation alone is not a solution. It's not even close. But it doesn't mean you don't encourage it and do whatever you can to get people to conserve more water. Pricing alone will drive water efficiency. As prices go up, and you don't drive up prices just to get people to conserve water, they're going up for their own reasons, and that in itself causes people to use less water. I think agricultural water is kind of a future supply that in the Central Valley, that is the predominant use of water statewide, is all the farming in the Central Valley. At some point, the farmers will recognize the value of that water beyond the value of the crops they're watering, the lettuce or whatever they're growing, and they will agree to sales of their water and by the urban areas. And that is one way that the urban areas may be able to provide water for their future demands, is by basically water deals with the farmers. Already one of those occurred in the Imperial Valley down in eastern San Diego County, where the city of San Diego struck a deal with the irrigators to fallow some of their land in return for use of that water, and they were paid very handsomely for that water, and it was like a 25-year deal. Storing water in groundwater basins is another way of, when you have a lot of water, if you have a really, really wet year, and they do occur, is you've got to find a place to put that water in the ground as much as you can. If you're not going to build new reservoirs, new big giant, you heard about Hetch Hetchy, well, who's going to build another Hetch Hetchy? We're talking about tearing down Hetch Hetchy. You're not going to build more Hetch Hetchies. So what do? You try to find groundwater basins to store the water in, which takes more facilities, but at least the water is underground, and you store surplus water there in times of we have plenty of water, and then in other times of need you pump it back out. That's called conjunctive use between surface water and groundwater. Expanding existing reservoirs maybe to some degree. If you have available area within an existing reservoir catchment area, you may be able to do some expansion there, but probably not new massive large reservoirs. And finally, of course, purification of sewer water and seawater are probably going to be heavily relied upon in the future. And that's where we are in Southern California. We're at that point. So from OCWD's perspective, as I mentioned, population is really driving the need for going to a new water supply, and also the uncertainty of future imported supplies. All the reasons that I mentioned, that we can't guarantee we're going to get more water from imported, so we're going to have to come up with ways of more self-sufficiency. So recycling is a new, reliable, drought-proof supply because it comes from sewage. It's water that comes from the sanitation district. It is used day in, day out. It's a constant, steady flow. And right now in our area, it's going out to the ocean. That's where most of it ends up. And so we'd like to use that. It's a resource. We can treat it, we can purify it, and we'll talk about it. So first, let's talk about Orange County Water District. There are lots of water districts. They're all over the place. There are little ones, big ones like Metropolitan Water District, or the multi-billion-dollar agency. There's Orange County Water District, which because of the population is probably one of the larger water districts in terms of facilities and budgets and so on, but we have about 180 employees. We have a geology or hydrogeology department. We're probably one of the few water districts that actually has a hydrogeology department. But we're a groundwater management agency. That's our job. We manage the groundwater basin underneath the northern half of Orange County. So that map there is Orange County from San Clemente right up here to the LA County line. That's the whole county of Orange. But the groundwater basin is only underneath the northern half. Geologically, that is the depression that's been filled in with sediments that holds the groundwater. If you live in southern Orange County, you're on top of consolidated sediments, sandstones, shales, and so on. It's not permeable. You're not going to get a lot of water out of it. And so they don't have an aquifer underneath them. They get almost all of their water from aqueduct water, imported water coming in from other parts of the state. Whereas the people in Orange County have the the northern Orange County within our district. Our district only covers the northern half, the blue boundary there. There are about 22 cities, Anaheim, Newport Beach, and so on, that are within that half of Orange County. That basin of ours, which I'll get to a little bit more in a minute, it got us through the last 5-year drought. Now last year, 2005, we had a record-breaking rainfall year. Now they're getting a huge year as far as down in the southern Sierra, like Mammoth and the San Joaquin drainage. They're getting massive snow, and they're worried about the delta and the runoff that's going to occur there. They're getting a tremendous wet year. We had it last year down in Southern California. But before that, we had a 5-year drought, and we were able to drain or draw down our groundwater basin like a big reservoir and get us through that drought. And it's got us through a few droughts. And it's bigger than any other reservoir in Southern California. It just happens to be underground. Because of the use of the groundwater basin, we've been able to double the yield or the amount of pumping from the basin over the last 30 years. We used to only pump about 150,000 acre-feet per year out of the basin, but because of our recharge activities and our seawater intrusion barriers that we have at the water district, we've been able to double the pumping up to 300,000 acre-feet per year. And we're very committed to improving water quality. We've undertaken a number of water quality projects, improvement projects, nitrates, VOC, volatile organic compounds, solvents and contamination. We've undertaken a number of projects to clean those up and improve quality. So I've just zoomed in to Orange County Water District's area. So this is just the northern half of Orange County right now. There's the LA County, Orange County border. And the aquifer continues all the way across up into LA County. It's a continuous aquifer system that's nothing but a political boundary right there. And so if our water levels are higher on this side than on that side of the county line, groundwater is going to flow across the county line, which it does. We lose about 5,000 to 10,000 acre-feet per year out to LA County. And that's just the cost of doing business right now. We haven't made a big deal out of it. It would probably be in court litigation for years if we tried to make a big deal out of it. But it's something that we're aware of, and that's just a political boundary right there. But OCWD provides about 65%, or through the pumping from the basin, our water district, because of the management activities that we do, it provides 65%, or about 2/3 of the total water usage of the 2.3 million people that live in this part of Orange County. So you got about another 700,000 people that live in South County. So this is by far the more populated part of Orange County is the northern half. This was developed first. Southern Orange County has been developing over the last 10 or 20 years and is continuing to grow. We're getting more infilling. You'd think, oh gosh, it's already fully urbanized, no more people are moving in here. It's totally wrong. The density is increasing in Orange County, and just the population, the people that live in Orange County are having families, and the families alone, it's not just people moving into Orange County, but the people that already live there are having families and kids, and they're staying, and that is driving population growth. So we're seeing densification occurring in our suburban Orange County. It's probably going to look a lot more like LA County here in the next 20 years. So what does OCWD do? One of our main functions is to recharge the groundwater basin. We take water from the Santa Ana River that comes down through the Santa Ana Canyon here. It comes from the Inland Empire area, the San Bernardino, Riverside, Chino Basin area of the upper Santa Ana River watershed. All those growing cities that have grown over the last 20 years use water, run it through their sewage treatment plants, dump it in the river. It comes down the river to Orange County. We percolate it into the ground, along with storm flow that we can capture during the wet season, which in our case is usually like 2 months long, and then it's dry for the next. Question?
How much of the Santa Ana makes it to the ocean here?
Very little. Only during storm periods when we can't capture all the water. So most of the Santa Ana River water we capture. Now last year, because it was a super, super wet year, we lost hundreds of thousands of acre feet of water flowed to the ocean because it was flowing at 10,000 cubic feet per second. We couldn't stop that. There haven't been fish in this part of the river, and I mean, even historically, or I should say prehistorically, the river did not flow. It hasn't flowed in over 100 years because during the summertime, there's no rain, and the river just doesn't have any surface flow to. In fact, the reason why there's water in the river now during the summertime is because of all the water usage from upstream. So they're supplying all the water, which is their sewage water. They don't dump it in the ocean, they dump it down the river, and before it gets to the ocean, we divert it. And we've been doing this for 30 years. In addition to our recharge facilities, we have 2 seawater intrusion barriers. And we're going to talk about this one down here just in a little bit of detail in a few slides. But these are 2 of 4 seawater barriers. There are 2 more up in LA County where Nari's son lives. There's one up there in Redondo Beach. And so we have 2 barriers because we do live along the coast with all the pumping inland. Pulls in seawater through some geologic gaps or aquifer systems that are connected with the ocean. Where does all the water get pumped out? From hundreds of production wells. In fact, there are 200 primary production wells that are owned by the 22 cities within our district. And so these cities own these wells. They pump them out. They typically are 1,000 feet deep, give or take. They cost $2 million a piece to drill now. Getting real expensive to drill a production well in Southern California. Not saying that's going to cost you guys $2 million to drill a well up here, but there are hardly any drillers left in Orange County. They've all consolidated, and there's no competition, and everything's expensive now. Fuel and energy and labor and so on. So pretty well scattered throughout the basin, except the Irvine area, which tends to have high salts and high nitrates and also has TCE in it, from the El Toro or former El Toro Marine Base. Well, right now we're about finished building a project to pump, and so you're going to see 7 more dots here. They're going to provide water supply for the city of Irvine, and it's going to take that water and it's going to remove the salts, the nitrates, and the TCE, and it's going to go to beneficial use. So that's how the water gets extracted, and Orange County Water District charges a replenishment assessment. Basically, it's a pump tax. And what we do with that is we put water back in the ground, we run the recharge operations, the recharge facilities, we run the seawater barriers, and we conduct all the water quality monitoring for all of those production wells. We sample them, we analyze the samples for all the chemicals and constituents required by the Department of Health Services, and we provide the results to the well owners and report that as they're supposed to do. And we conduct investigations and future planning and basically do whatever we need to do to manage the basin. So all that, we charge them a replenishment assessment of $205 an acre foot. So that RA, or replenishment assessment, we charge $205 for every acre foot pumped out. And as I mentioned, they're pumping about 300,000 acre feet per year out of the ground. Now, if you own a well, and you're pumping out groundwater, you pay us the $205 an acre foot, but you also have to pay the energy, the electricity, or natural gas to pump the water out of the ground. And right now, that's about $60 an acre foot. And that's going up. All energy is getting more expensive. So their cost, assuming they already have the well in the ground, and they've already spent that money, and they're not, and assuming labor is off to the side, but all these are real costs. minimum $265 an acre foot. But you do have labor to run your wells, people that have to run your water department, and you do have to have some kind of amortization of your cost to build the well in the first place. But still, assuming all those are sunk costs, you compare it with imported water, which is $500 an acre foot. Groundwater is a good deal. And so the more the cities can pump groundwater, the cheaper it is for them. And they would pump 100% of their total water demand, if they could, from the groundwater basin, if it weren't for us telling them, nope, you can only pump 65% right now. That's all we're going to let you, because there isn't enough groundwater that we can keep replenishing to cover 100% or anything above 65%. So for the other third of their water supply, they buy imported water here at $500 an acre foot. And just basically an acknowledgement here to our recently departed esteemed professor, Dr. David Todd, who I was just very, very fortunate to have gotten to know briefly over the last few years. He was one of our advisors on a panel that we had. And back in 1999, we were basically getting him up to speed on the groundwater basin. He had done some work in Orange County, but really hadn't spent a lot of time working on projects in Orange County or within our water district. And he said, Roy, this is one of the most complex systems I've had to deal with, and I've worked all over the world, and it completely bowled me over. When he said that, I said, you got to be kidding, you're just saying this. And he goes, no, this is a very complicated groundwater system, and it's very hard to tell where groundwater flows in 3 dimensions. And I said, gosh, I've been pulling my hair out with this basin for 10 years, and I'm still having trouble figuring it out. And he goes, don't worry about it. It's a complicated system that you're dealing with. And so that made me feel good when someone of his background said that. And so as I show here, these are groundwater contours of equal elevation of the principal aquifer system. This is the deep aquifer system that's being pumped. And the sea level line, water at sea level, or where the elevation of the water surface in that aquifer is at 0 feet, is right there. And everything here is below sea level, up to 50, 60 feet below sea level down here along the coast. Well, the ocean's at sea level. Our groundwater's at 50 feet below that. That's the gradient that's going to try to pull in seawater from the ocean, and does. That's why we need the seawater barriers. And so if I did a slice through the basin, just chop it right in half right along the Santa Ana River, you would see something like this. And we've done cross-sections based on geologic information throughout the whole groundwater basin. We used it to build a numerical flow model, so we have a groundwater flow model of our basin that we can do predictions with. But it's about anywhere from 2,000 and even up to 3,000 feet deep before you get into consolidated sediments, non-water-bearing formation. Generally, if you even did drill wells and you could pump any water from this, it would tend to be pretty high in salts, probably 2,000, 3,000 or above parts per million salt. So the fresh water is really anything under less than about 2,000 feet. Most of the production wells, as I mentioned, are about 1,000 feet deep. There are a few production wells that go down to 2,000 feet. But the deeper you drill your wells, the harder it is for the recharge water to get down into those deep aquifers. So it's a big bowl-shaped structure pushed up along the coast by the Newport-Eaglewood Fault System, which is great to narrowing down the path that seawater can get into the basin. But it's going to be a problem when we all get clobbered from the next earthquake. But hey, you take what you can get. And on the inland side, it's been pushed up along the Chino Hills. So it's definitely a synclinal structure that trends northwest, southeast, like everything else in Southern California, Newport Inglewood and the San Andreas Fault System, and so the basin continues right into Los Angeles County. So it's part of the overall Los Angeles basin. This is the one I show to most lay people. I don't even show them that complicated one. I say, here's the groundwater basin. And this is all people need. You don't need to show them the complicated one. You show them the easy one. And they get it. Whoop, I didn't mean to go backwards. I'm going backwards some more. There we go. I'm still, oh gosh. Get my arrows right here, sorry about that. So the simple version is we have 3 primary aquifer systems. We have a shallow system a middle or principal aquifer system and a deep aquifer system. And very few wells pump down below 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet in this area. Most wells pump, as I've shown schematically, the wells pump right there in the middle, between about 300 feet and 1,000 feet. The shallow aquifer system happens to be very permeable, but it tends to be of lesser quality, tends to be more susceptible to surface contamination, things like gas stations, MTBE, nitrates from past fertilizer. Orange County, of course, was all farming back in the 50s and earlier. And the shallow aquifer has been largely abandoned from pumping, but leakage still occurs. Water can still move through these brown zones, which are representing aquitards or lower permeability units. Water can still get through those and move into the deeper aquifer. And water can still get into this deep, deep aquifer here, and even has so much pressure on it in some places that it actually pushes up, because there's so much pumping in this area that it actually draws water up from below. So really, water is moving in 3 dimensions in the basin, and our job is to try to figure that out and understand from a quality standpoint where water's going or where contaminants are flowing, and overall how much water is in the basin and how can we minimize drawdown or low water levels. And as I mentioned earlier, our basin has gotten us through several droughts because it is like a big reservoir. And if we go back to the 50s, this is right when Orange County Water District first was allowed to charge that replenishment assessment. Before 1956, we couldn't charge any money for the water pumped out of the ground. So what happened? Everybody pumped as much water as they could, and there was no control on the amount of pumping, and we had a lot of seawater intrusion. Plus, the groundwater basin was pulled down up to 700,000 acre feet from full. They just drew down 700,000 acre feet, took it out of storage. So when we could charge money for the water, and I think in those days we charged $3.50 an acre foot, and we bought millions of acre feet. Over the next 30 years, we bought over 3 million acre feet of Colorado River water. A lot of it was pumped out as we were buying it, but we filled the groundwater basin up during the 60s because we had no seawater barrier until 1975. And before then, we didn't have any. So the only way we could stop seawater from occurring was to fill the basin up. Well, that's expensive. But sure enough, we got it full. We went into the drought of the 70s, El Nino years. We bought water and we filled it with natural storm water in the early 80s, big El Nino years. Went into the drought of the late 80s, early 90s. Came out of that drought. We had several wet years. Pretty much leveled off at about 200,000 acre feet from full. And that's a good level for us to be. We don't want to be completely full. That means you have no room to capture more water if there's a big rain year. You want to give yourself some headway. And then this is the last 5-year drought that we just went through until 2005 when we had the big rainfall year, and we recovered over almost 200,000 acre feet of volume in the groundwater basin. Huge, huge year. I started at the Water District in 1988, and I never thought the basin could recover that much in 1 year. But we looked at the water levels, we measured water levels all over the groundwater basin. We saw how much they came up. They came up 40, 50, 60 feet over the prior year, and you calculate that out, even conservatively, and we came up with almost 200,000 acre feet of recovery. So it's great to know if you have a big wet year that your basin is capable of that kind of replenishment. So that was a good sign. Now, where we go after this? We probably would just kind of like to level off and maybe grow a little bit higher, but not too much higher. I think we're in fantastic shape for now. But as you can see, we have a lot of droughts. You get a couple of wet years, and then you go for the next 6 or 7 or 5 years of drought, below average rainfall, and you end up drawing your reservoir down. So these are just some pictures of our recharge facilities. Here's the Santa Ana River coming in from the east, and we divert the water from the river into these settling basins. Even the riverbed itself is sandy, and it percolates quite a bit of water. And actually, here's the river right here. This is a parallel channel to the river, and it percolates water. And then here are several recharge basins, and we have to clean them. We have to drain them because they clog up with silt and sediment. and we scrape them with bulldozers, and then we put water back in them, and it percolates again. We tend to clean them maybe twice a year if we can. And that's just a zoom in of one of our recharge basins right there. I mentioned seawater intrusion, and it's probably the biggest limiting factor to how much water we can pump out of our basin, at least in the short term. We could pump 500,000 acre-feet out before we really start worrying about massive amounts of seawater moving in and past our barriers. Our barriers are not good. They're not sufficient to prevent seawater after we've drawn out about 500,000 acre-feet of water. If we didn't have seawater intrusion, we probably could pump 1 million acre-feet out of the basin before we started thinking we got to start replenishing this basin. Or some other issue like land subsidence might become an issue. The problem is seawater barriers are very expensive to operate. They take a lot of injection wells to maintain. You basically are injecting a lot of fresh water to form a pressure mound, a high pressure mound that's above sea level that stops seawater from moving in. It keeps the gradient going in the other direction. And this is zoom in just down here in the Huntington Beach area. Here's Newport Beach down here if you guys have been down in Newport. This is the, you can't see it very well, but these are the mesas. These are uplift. This is all part of the Newport-Inglewood system. So this has all been pushed up, but the ancient Santa Ana River has carved a notch. It's carved several notches up the coast. But this one here, or gaps, they're sometimes called gaps, back when the sea level was 200 feet lower, it carved a gap, a notch about 200 feet deep. And then as the sea level rose, the river dropped its sediment load, and mostly sands and gravels. So there's about a 200-foot thick, 2-mile wide aquifer here that is open to the ocean. And so it's just a layer of sand and gravel that seawater can move right in. And from there, these contour lines represent chloride, sodium chloride in seawater. What was it doing from 93 to 95 to 98 to 2002? It was doing an end around our seawater barrier. The green dots are all our injection wells that we've used since 1975. And it was progressing in straight at the injection wells, particularly in this area, but it was really moving around both ends. So now we're installing new injection wells. In fact, we've already got them in as part of this groundwater replenishment system. And these new wells here and here are going to create much larger freshwater pressure mounds or pressure areas to hopefully push the seawater back out, at least to the point where our goal is to push it at least to this point where it can't go anywhere. It can't go under the mesa at this point due to faulting and things. So our goal is to push the seawater back to about this point. If we over-inject fresh water, we'll be pushing fresh water right out to the ocean, then we're wasting water. So we have to try to draw a kind of a happy balance there between just the right amount of injection and not over-injecting. So as I mentioned, the seawater barriers, they protect the basin. We've been doing it for 30 years, and the supply to that barrier has been 50% purified sewage water. We've been doing it for 30 years. We built Water Factory 21, which is one of the first pioneering recycling systems in the world, and it was the first one permitted to inject purified sewage water into a drinking water aquifer back in 1975. And we've been operating it ever since. Well, Water Factory 21 was demolished about 2 years ago because it had outlived its useful life, and we're now building a much larger system called the Groundwater Replenishment System that will replace Water Factory 21. And we first thought of needing to do that. We said we need to expand Water Factory 21 because our seawater barrier can only inject 15 million gallons a day. We need to inject 40 million gallons a day. All those new injection wells are going to take more water. We need to put a lot more water in the ground to stop seawater from moving in. Where are we going to get the water to do that? And we said, well, let's expand the purification facilities of Water Factory 21. And when we looked at how to do that, we said, let's just demo the whole thing. It's not worth trying to build onto a 30-year-old project. Let's just build a new project that takes advantage of all the new technology that's available, and that's where we got the groundwater replenishment system. So what is the GWR system? Well, it's the new water quality and supply project. It's going to supply water to the barrier. It's going to go a lot further. The barrier is just one part of where the water goes. It's also going to go up the Santa Ana River into those recharge facilities that I showed the photographs of. So it's going to actually provide a lot more water than just what the barrier needs. It takes basically sewer water to between bottled and distilled quality. We're basically taking everything out of the water but the water itself. And so it's extremely low salts and minerals in the water because of all the treatment processes that it goes through. It uses the same technology that are used to strain and purify juices and fruits, drugs, pharmaceuticals. Use the same technology to purify the medicine that we take and the juices that we drink and a lot of other things. So it's all behind the scenes that we don't know about. Even when you're not in the water industry, the same technology is used for other things that we eat or take for medication. We looked at a number of options for water supply. You know, I talked about conservation. We're going to keep doing more conservation, but it's not enough to free up the supply we needed to supply the seawater barriers. And it's certainly not enough to provide water for the future demands that I talked about with the population growth. Ocean desalination right now, it's happening. Projects are getting online and future projects are being, the feasibility is being studied. Right now, it's anywhere from $800 to $2,000 an acre foot. Now, I mentioned imported water right now is about $500 an acre foot. So someone would have to make the economic decision to go build an ocean desalination plant, and the cost of that project water will be anywhere from $300 to $1,500 more than the other alternative available water supply. And that's a big decision for someone to have to make, is do you want to spend that kind of money for an ocean desalter? And they're starting to make those kinds of decisions because there's no other, you can't get more imported water indefinitely. So they're starting to look at that. The other option that we looked at or people considered was building more reclamation plants. That would be essentially, a lot of water goes to irrigation, you know, watering parks, golf courses, and schoolyards and things like that. And instead of using drinking water, you know, or non-recycled water to water all those parks and golf courses, let's do more recycled water usage for irrigation and landscaping. The problem is, at least in Orange County, there are 2 main sewage treatment plants, and they're way down by the coast. So we would have to we have to treat the sewage down there and then repipe it back all over the whole county in a huge distribution system that would essentially duplicate the distribution system that's already there for the drinking water. Well, it's not economic to do that in an already urbanized, developed area. We tried to do that in parts of right around where our office is in Fountain Valley, and we built a very small system that supplies about 7,500 acre-feet per year to irrigate land using, or parks and golf courses in greenbelt areas. And that cost $55 million, and economically it did not work out to build that kind of a project to only supply 7,500 acre-feet per year. That's why the cost per acre foot is in the neighborhood of $3,000. So it's just not cost effective. If you're in a growing area, a newly developing area, that's the time to put in the dual piping system. Put in your drinking water potable supply system and your non-potable greenbelt irrigation system. And that's what the city of Irvine did. They thought of that in the early 70s when they were developing. They said, we're going to put in the dual piping system, and that made sense to them to do that. So, and as I mentioned, buying imported water, we can't just count on Metropolitan Water District to continue to supply all of our future demands. We need to diversify where we get our water. So we knew that that wasn't, we're still going to be buying more imported water, but not for the barrier. So looking at the groundwater replenishment system, it's supposed to go on, it's going to go online in 2007. It's being built. It's been under construction for a few years now. and it's really taking shape. It's going to be comprised of 3 main treatment processes: microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and finally advanced oxidation. I'll talk about those in a minute. The water that we're going to get is going to be the sewer water from the Orange County Sanitation District right down here in Fountain Valley. We're going to take their secondary treated water, so it's gone through 2 stages of treatment already from their facility. We're going to take it to our groundwater replenishment system, purify it through 3 steps, and then inject it in the seawater barrier. And the half that doesn't get injected into the barrier is going to be piped up the Santa Ana River through a big long pipeline which has now been constructed and going to be percolated in the recharge basins that I mentioned earlier. So it's going to be split in 2 places. It's all going to go back in the aquifer, and it's all going to be used to supply the groundwater basin. So the first step is microfiltration. It's basically a series of very small tubes that have pore spaces in them, that basically little straws, and the water is forced on the outside of these tubes, and water and many impurities, things like protozoa and fine particulates, don't get through the pore spaces, and you have clean water coming out the other end. And so that's the first stage of the purification. It works great. This is what I was mentioning that they use for fruit juices and things to purify those. It was used by Disney in Orlando on a massive scale as their first step to treat their water. So they're using that quite a bit. And it really cleans up the water so it's ready to go through reverse osmosis. Because if we tried to put this water straight into an RO system, it would clog up the RO membranes, because there's tiny little particulates in the water that we need to get out. And so the MF system takes care of that. The second step is reverse osmosis, and that's been used since World War II. That's what you use for ocean desalting. It's the same membrane technology that you use high pressure to force water through a very, very fine membrane, finer than the microfiltration membranes, and it essentially demineralizes the water. It takes everything out of the water except for an extremely small amount of organic and inorganic material. Most molecules can't get through a reverse osmosis membrane, and that certainly would include things like viruses and bacteria and protozoa. Those are much larger than typical molecules of salts and things. And this graphic, it's probably definitely for the layperson, but it's basically to try to visualize how small a water molecule is, which is like a tennis ball, versus a softball, which is most inorganic molecules. And you move up the scale to organic compounds, which tend to have higher molecular structures and higher molecular weights, which have even more trouble getting through an RO membrane. And you work up the scale to viruses would be as big as a Mack truck and so on. It's just, and then you got the Matterhorn up there with the protozoa. So can't get the Matterhorn through reverse osmosis. These things will be stopped by the RO membrane. And the third step, to cover anything of very, very small molecular weight that can get through RO membranes, we zap it with advanced oxidation. We use very high-powered ultraviolet light, which is basically concentrated light, high beams, to break up any remaining organic molecules in the water. And that works very well. Thanks for coming. You bet. And that takes care of anything that would get through the other 2 treatment processes. And we use ultraviolet light and peroxide to break up the last bits of organics in the water. So it's a multiple barrier approach that we use. It's fully approved by the Department of Health Services, and it's been used in a number of areas. It's being used all over Southern California. It's being used all over the world. Singapore and other areas are using this.
Did you say how much it costs per acre foot to treat?
This project is competitive with imported water, $500 an acre foot. Now that does include some subsidies. We do have grant funding from the federal government and also the state government, because they support this project so much. They have given us very large grant funds to help bring the price of the water down. And so we're now, after you include all those subsidies, it's about $500 an acre foot. So we're paying about the same to build this project and, as it would be for us to just somehow get more imported water, if it was even available. It's the safest water available. It's better than any other water in terms of total organic compound concentration. It's less than 1 part per million or milligram per liter compared to water coming from Northern California, compared with water coming from the Colorado River, and compared with water coming down the Santa Ana River, which has between 5 and 6 milligrams per liter of organics in the water. So all our alternative water supplies have higher organic loads than the water that comes from this project. Looking at just salts alone, total dissolved solids, as I mentioned, it's approaching distilled water, which would be 0. It's about 50 to 60 parts per million salt load. In fact, it's so pure we actually have to add minerals back to the water, just like bottled water companies have to do, because they can't just distill water and give it to you. It's not healthy to drink pure water. It'll, be kind of aggressive on the intestines, and also they put minerals back in because it tastes better as well. We have to put minerals back in so we don't do any damage to the pipelines. It will corrode and eat up the pipe. If it's pure water, it's very aggressive. So we put minerals back in it. We've had a number of organizations that have reviewed this project. You don't just go build something like this without tremendous amounts of oversight and regulatory hearings and approvals, and we've gotten to that. And Department of Health Services and the Regional Water Quality Control Board have to permit this project, and they've given us a permit to operate, as they have with Water Factory 21 and all the other projects that do sewer water purification. We've had a number of health and medical experts, as I'll mention, that support this project, and Christine Moe is one of them. She's an advisor for the Center of Disease Control down in Atlanta. She supports the project. She's reviewed the data and the information, the purification process. She's comfortable with it. Dr. Harvey Collins, he was the former head of the Department of Health Services drinking water section. He is a very big supporter of the project. He's comfortable with the technology. And some of the benefits, I didn't talk about the global water crisis, but I believe other experts or people may have talked about the global water issues. The world is in desperate need of water, and this technology can be used anywhere in the world. So this is something that other countries could use if they want to learn from us. We have lots of people coming over from all over the world, Korea, Japan, you name the country. Many have been to the water district to see what we're doing and are taking that information back with them because they have similar needs. It helps us get through or maintain our lifestyle in our arid region. We can't count on rain to cover all of our water supply and other needs. It's very drought proof because even during a drought people use water. There's a constant flow of water coming through the sanitation district. So we have that supply whether there's a drought or not. Mentioned the quality of the water. It's very high quality. It's better than the alternative water supplies that we have. And we feel as though it's doing our part for the environment, because one thing we're doing is we're relying less on Northern California for this supply of water. We're able to get our own supply and not have to bring it in from other areas. We're also sending less water to the ocean. All this water that we're recharging and putting back in the groundwater basin would have gone out to the ocean through the sewer. So we're reducing the discharges out to the ocean. And the other thing I think was pretty interesting is that it uses half the energy. The biggest energy usage part of that project is the reverse osmosis, because you use very high pressure to force water through those membranes. But even though that takes a lot of energy, it's less than half the energy that is taken to pump water over the Tehachapi's down from Northern California. So this is a very energy efficient way of providing water compared to other uses. So we're less energy intensive. I mentioned the outfall. One of the reasons that this project was economical for us was our partners on the project, the Orange County Sanitation District, OCSD, very close to OCWD, but they're the sister agency. They run the sewer system. We manage the groundwater basin. If this project weren't built, they were going to have to either build a new ocean outfall, which is where their sewage goes now. All the sewer water goes out to the ocean. It's about, I think it's like 10 or 15 miles offshore. I forget the distance. They were going to hit the limit of their capacity of their existing outfall pipeline. They were going to have to build a much bigger one that was going to cost them $170 million. And since part of their agency's mission is to do more water recycling, this project fit very nicely with that mission statement, and economically they would prefer to put the money into a recycling reuse project than to just build a bigger ocean outfall so they could dump more of their sewer water out to the ocean. So we partnered with them, or they partnered with us, and combined we were able to help finance this project largely from our own tax base with the few subsidies that I mentioned. So it's nice to see the two agencies cooperatively working together, and that was a major decision. Funding and timing, cost, $487 million. This is the biggest project that we've ever built. It's coming along very nicely. It's going to produce 72,000 acre-feet per year. So remember I mentioned we're pumping about 300,000 acre-feet out of the groundwater basin. This is going to let us pump another 72,000 acre-feet a year out of the groundwater basin. And that's 72,000 acre-feet that we won't have to get from Northern California or the Colorado River. The unit costs about $500 an acre-foot, and that includes the, it would be higher if we were not given about $92 million in state and federal financing for this. Yeah?
By higher, do you mean on par with what these outfall?
I think if you added if you took out these subsidies, I think this cost would go up, I'm thinking around $700 or $800 an acre, to $700 or $800 an acre foot. So it would go up by a couple $100 or so an acre foot. I'd have to do the math to figure it out, but I think this would go up to about $700 or $800 an acre foot if you took out the subsidies. The Metropolitan Water District has agreed to provide us an annual payment towards the operation and maintenance cost, O&M cost here. Over the life of the project, that would add up to $86 million. And once it goes online in 2007, we will already be looking at how to possibly expand the project. It really ends up depending on how much water or sewer water the sanitation district can give us. If they can give us more and we can do it economically, we would look at ways of expanding the project.
What was in it for Met?
Metropolitan, because we didn't have to buy 72,000 acre feet that they would have to go figure out where to get that water from. So it basically helps them not have to worry that much more about all their customers in Southern California.
So weren't they making that money?
No, we didn't reduce our demand. We didn't cut back 72,000. This is going against future demands. So it's basically in the future, with all the future growth in the area, it's 72,000 that they would have had to find water for the population. And I guess that's one thing that people have to realize, or at least in Southern California, as a water agency, we can't stop people from coming in Orange County. We have no power to stop people from raising families and having kids and reducing immigration and all the things that cause population to grow. We have no control over that. All we are supposed to do is to provide water for however many people come. If population wants to flatten out for whatever reason, then our life gets easier. But we're there at the mercy of people coming into Orange County. And we're here to try to make their lives as comfortable as we can when they come to Orange County, like everybody else wants to move in. So we have given literally hundreds of presentations like this before, and I'm not normally the person that gives it, so this is really kind of fun for me, the hydrogeologist, to talk about this project. And these are many of the groups that we have given this talk to before, because we are actively trying to get the word out. We're trying to educate people, because we found if we don't get to people first, and all they hear is the yuck factor and the toilet to tap issue, if that's the first message they get, doesn't matter how much talking we can do and explaining about all the purification processes, the mindset is, I don't want to hear about it. So we want to get out and let people know we're confident with the project, we're confident with the technology, and we want to let you know about it, and we want to get your feedback on it. And so that's why we've gone out, and anybody that will listen to us, we will come and give a talk to them and meet with them and talk about the project. And because of that, we've gained a tremendous amount of supporters, including environmental groups like the Surfrider Foundation, the Sierra Club, are full supporters of this project. And a number of other groups, health and science and education and so on, teachers, the National Water Resources Research Institute, school districts, the medical community. It's amazing. So the groups that have heard this are very supportive of our project. They understand it, they get the mission, and they're confident. And I could go on and on, all the clubs and so on. It's amazing. And so we've been doing this for several years. This project has started quite a while ago. I think I have a timeline. I'm not going to go on and on, but you've got to get to your elected officials, because all it takes is one or two politicians to decide that they want to get up on their soapbox and make an issue out of this, not necessarily maybe because they believe in whatever their issue is, but it's good for publicity and it maybe gets votes. And so we wanted to get the elected community comfortable with this project. And if someone had an issue, we wanted to hear about them and we wanted to talk to them about it to make sure if they were going to try to argue about something, let it be on valid grounds. Don't just use this project as a reason to get elected unless you deeply feel as though this is not the right thing to do. So far, we haven't had anyone that feels that way. And so on. 12 years in the making. I mean, I was at the district in '88. We hadn't started talking about a new recycling project. We had Water Factory 21 that was chugging along at about 15 million gallons a day. And about the early 90s, we knew we had to expand the seawater barrier and we needed a bigger water supply to do it. And so it was about the early 90s that we said, how are we going to expand Water Factory 21? What are we going to do? And so it was probably in about 93, 94 when we started to work on the feasibility study of a larger recycling sewer water purification project. And so that's when we first got the feasibility study report done back in '95. And at that time, we said, what are we going to name this project? We said, let's call it the Century Project, because it will be ready at the turn of the century in 2000. Sure. Here we are. 2007 is when the project will be online. And we went through all the environmental processes, the EIRs, and so on. We started the design in 2001. We began the first construction in 2004. And so it's about 3 years of construction, and it'll be up and running. So it shows you how long, from concept to completion, these kinds of projects take. So if you think you're going to need water in 5 years on a big scale, good luck trying to get that project built in 5 years, because nothing gets done in short periods of time because of all the different hurdles that you have to go through. It's amazing. And I'm just lucky that I've been able to be around to be able to see this go on for as long as I have. I'm very fortunate. It's a great place to work. It's a multidisciplinary group. I don't know all the departments that are represented here by you folks, and even some of you who are not even in the university but have come from outside. But no question, engineers are the backbone of the whole project. But it takes a lot more than engineers. Communication specialists. We've had tremendous public outreach to gather and gain support for this project. Obviously, a pitch for the old hydrogeologist. It is putting water in the ground. We had to do a lot of investigation to figure out where the water was going and where the wells were going to go, the injection wells and so on. Environmental specialists that do all the sampling. We've got chemists that run all the analyses, the accounting people and so on. Even attorneys have to draw up agreements between agencies. Who's going to finance? Who's going to pay for what? What if this happens? What if that happens? That's all drawn up in various agreements and is negotiated. So, and the data that's generated from these projects, you have to report all this information. It's all available and it goes to regulatory agencies and anybody else that wants to see it has to be collected. Computer database specialists are key in managing all that information. You're going to have big Oracle databases to house all this, and you got to put it in a form that you don't just churn out a bunch of tabular data. You're going to want to graph it. You want to plot it so people can see what it means, not just try to figure out through the numbers. So, I'm open for any questions.
When you're doing your microfiltration and reverse osmosis, you end up with a small solid stream, if you will?
Yes, sure. Concentrate, if you will. Sure, sure.
What do you do with that?
That goes back to the sewage system, and that goes back out in the ocean outfall. But we don't put it back into the influent because it's already taken as much out as we can. So it goes back out to the ocean outfall, and it's discharged out to the ocean. It's blended with the other water that goes out to the ocean. Yeah.
Maybe you could name your project the Millennium Project. It's the century.
Yeah. We missed the millennium, though. We wanted it ready on 2000. Go ahead.
I'm being facetious.
Sure.
But seriously, you showed the involvement of public, of community, and I wonder whether you care to compare your successful project from that point of view with, say, San Diego.
Right, and San Diego was one of the areas where they were not successful with their public outreach. And I wasn't deeply involved really at all with that situation, and so I only know a little bit about what happened, but my understanding... Well, we went out to the community before the project was very far along. I mean, it was really just a concept. And we immediately started going out and talking to the community about this project. We talked to the elected officials, we talked to the business community, we got to, basically we just started down the list. I don't think that was done in the San Diego project. My understanding is that by the time the first thing that was heard was some things over the radio waves. I think there was a radio announcer or someone that basically started to do negative publicity from his standpoint on the radio, and I think there was a claim of some kind of environmental justice issue, that people that were getting that water were from lower economic backgrounds and that they were being unfairly dealt with, or at least that was the claim. And so for whatever reason, we got out before any of those kinds of issues, because they aren't true for one, but in our case at least, we got out and educated the public. Because we did our own focus groups. We did studies with people. We invited people from the community in, and we started talking about this. And we tried two different approaches. We would first say, what do you guys think about drinking sewage water? As their first question. And they said, oh, no way, I don't want to do that. And they said, oh, but let us tell you about this project that we have. And then we go through the whole presentation. We did not turn very many people. But if we didn't say that initially, we said, we have a project that we want to talk to you about, and we just want you to hear us out. And then we took them through the presentation, and we talked about this. And we said, now, you realize that this water ultimately may get to your tap because it goes into the ground, and a few years later it may get pumped out from your wells, and it's going to go into your tap. Now, hearing what we just told you, can you accept this? And we had tremendous response on the positive, that people said, yes, you've given us the reasons why this project makes sense, and we're more comfortable with it. So the key is you got to get out in front and talk to the people and do a massive public outreach to the community before they hear the alternative. They hear someone just saying, I wouldn't do this if it's the last thing I did, and so on. And I think that's what happened to Los Angeles, too. They didn't aggressively reach out to the public and talk to them about what they were proposing to do. In their case, they had already built the project, and now it's not being used. So that's a problem. Yeah?
Were both of those projects, the San Diego and the LA, were they both similar? Was it groundwater replenishment and water wells, or was it something different?
The San Diego project was different, I know, because it was going to send the water to a very large surface reservoir. So it was going to recycle, purify sewage water, and then go into a surface reservoir. And so it wasn't going into a groundwater basin. In our case, obviously it's going into a groundwater basin. In Los Angeles' case, it was going to be recharged into the San Fernando Valley groundwater basin. So it was similar to ours. I don't know if it used all the same treatment processes and purification processes that we had, but it was, in that particular case, Los Angeles' case, my understanding is there was a former city councilman who decided to make that one of his main issues and basically campaigned against that project. And so that helped to undo that project. Now, I understand that they are interested in revisiting the issue, but it's very difficult after having that kind of a campaign to try to get public support back in your favor. It's really hard because people, once they get convinced of something, it's human nature to not want to get convinced the other way. It's a challenge. You had a question, yeah. Sorry, I keep looking over here. Go ahead.
I'm just going to follow up on that. Are you aware of any other similar projects where purified sewer water is being successfully blended with the drinking water source, either in the ground or in the water?
Singapore, Los Angeles, the seawater barriers in Los Angeles, they're already using 50% recycled water going into their injection wells where it's moving into the groundwater basin, so it is being done in other areas. I think it's South Africa is actually going straight into the drinking water system. That's called direct potable reuse. Basically, you're purifying sewer water and you're not even putting it into another reservoir or groundwater basin and giving it some travel time before you pump it out and drink it. They're going straight into the tap, is my understanding. Now, we have people that want us to hurry up and do that. We're saying we are not ready for that yet. There's still a lot of reasons that we think we need to go through this approach, but there are places that are going. I mean, the astronauts do it, but you know, that's the astronauts. Question?
You mentioned that some of your 8 feet in the groundwater flow north in LA.
Right.
I wondered if, is that MWD, is that their jurisdiction once if it goes north?
Actually, there's another, there are a series of agencies. There's one agency known as the Water Replenishment District of Southern California. Sounds like it covers all of Southern California, but they're similar to us. They manage the Los Angeles basin area, the basin across the county line, and so that's similar to us.
You work with them? They manage the same basin?
They have a few hydrogeologists over there, and we compare notes, and you know, we certainly make them aware, you know, or we have in the past, that we acknowledge that there's some water going across, and we've asked them, does that compare similarly to your calculations? I just want to see if we're in the ballpark here, and they said, yeah, you're close to what, you know, I don't know what their real number is, but they said they estimate in the neighborhood of several thousand acre-feet per year come in from Orange County. So in fact, I owe the fellow there, Ted Johnson, a call just to find out what their strategy is for filling their basin. Are they going to keep it low or keep it high? Relative to our basin, it will cause more or less water, but what they do, it's their decision. But I don't think they're going to try to take advantage of it and keep their basin low just so they can pull more water over from our side. It sounds like a lot of water and it's worth a lot of money, but in terms of 300,000 acre-feet, if we're losing 5 to 7% or 7 to 10% of the water, or it's less than that, far less than that actually, we can deal, a few percent we can deal with. It would cost too much money to try to put in a well field to stop that water from getting over there. Yeah?
How do you do, for the non-water experts, if you have people giving you mystical and spiritual answers and they're uncomfortable about this, how do you handle that?
Oh boy, I'll tell you, it's really tough from a science and engineering standpoint if you have someone who's giving you, mystical or maybe non-traditional concerns. If that would be a tough one for me. I wouldn't necessarily know how to answer that. I think we have to be able to speak on a playing field that covers everybody, and if certain people have certain beliefs that are foreign to us or maybe don't apply to everybody, it may be tough for us. We have to get back to the physical, the empirical information is, I think, what we have to rely on.
Are there any churches that support this?
We have given presentations to church groups, and we have support from church groups. I know the Sisters of St. Joseph are supportive. They run one of the hospitals down there. So we have given talks, and we do have support from church groups.
They don't send a priest to bless the plant when the plant is constructed.
No, in fact, as a public agency, we have to be careful about any kind of preferential treatment. We need all the help we can get. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
These days, DHS is considering the use of recycled water for other uses, and one of them being urban. There are many projects in California where recycled water is being used for distribution to, as you said, landscape and also commercial and industrial. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about the use of recycled water for swimming pool, laundry, and also dishwater from an urban point of view or treatment.
I don't know if it's been approved for full body contact, uses. So such as swimming pools, you're basically going directly from the water purification system right into a swimming pool is what you're talking about, or used for a dishwasher or something. I mean, technically the water that we're producing you could drink it, and people have drunk the water. I mean, it is safe enough to drink. So you could use it for swimming. I don't think the regulatory community is ready to approve and permit those direct uses of water, of recycled water at this time. I'm not aware that a swimming pool is an approved use of recycled water. Technically, I'm comfortable with that, but that's, the technical community often is okay with things first. You've got to bring everybody else along to get confidence in the technology, and that can take quite a while before people are ready to do that.
Is it something that you foresee in the future happening in 10, 15 years? Do you think the public will, and the technology might improve, and the health commissioners might have a better trust for the technology, for the implementation? Do you foresee that happening maybe in 10, 15 years?
Possibly. I guess I'd like to be optimistic that the community is increasing in its sophistication and ability to gather and absorb all this information. But we've got a tremendous challenge of educating the public on just basic fundamental issues. I mean, the literacy rate and so on. We have huge challenges of keeping the public educated on science in general, much less things like reverse osmosis. And so you could be somewhat less optimistic that is the community in 15 years going to be as educatable as the community today? And that's a big question, given the ability of the schools to graduate students and things, because those are going to be the people that we're going to have in this room in 15 years. And are they going to be able to absorb what I talked about today as well as you're able to absorb it? I would like to think so. But one thing is, for sure, if we can succeed on projects like this, then projects like this, after operating for a number of years successfully, will help gain public confidence. They can say, see, they've been doing it for 10 or 15 years, why can't we do it? And so I think that's the key. And that's where we started with Water Factory 21. We probably wouldn't be here building this project if we hadn't had 30 years of success with Water Factory 21. We have the confidence of the regulatory and the public community to build projects and operate them. And so that's why we have people from all over the world coming to see what we're doing, because they know if we can do it, then they can do it too. So that's what's going to gain the confidence, I think.
It's already 7 o'clock. We'll take one more question.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just wonder, how do you inform the public? Some cities around the country, they have a sign on highways saying, for example, City of Oakland uses recycled water.
Sure.
So you have to make choices, the public have to make choices to live in the county. How do you inform them? Is there a standard procedure you have to notify the public?
Well, everybody who drinks water gets a what they call a consumer confidence report, where it basically talks about the quality of the water that they have. So that's a state mandate that everybody gets mailed out once a year, a consumer confidence report. But with the millions of people that live in our county, it's really hard to get to every single person. We just have to start with community groups. Homeowners associations, Rotary clubs, any kind of community club or organization, we go out to them and we say, do you know anybody who would like to hear our presentation or hear about their water supply? Let us know. Give us their phone number, and if they can organize a group of people, either they can come in to the water district, or we'll go to them in whatever church or school or otherwise and give them the talk. So it's a group of people in our communications department who are constantly on the phone, basically like a salesperson saying, will you listen to us? We want to talk to you. And that's what we have to do. But we also do what we call a Water 101. We call it OC 101. And it's a class that we give. I think it's like a 1 or 2 hour class at the water district. And we bring people in, anybody, it's in the newspaper and it's on the web, and anybody who comes in, we'll give them a talk on Orange County Water 101. So those are ways that we've been trying to get people understanding where the water is, where the water is coming from. You have to go out and get it, and it takes staffing, it takes people to do that.
Actually,
Yeah.
if you go back 100 years and see how the Santa Clara Valley Water District started, look at the history, it is a remarkable self-education of the public. Despite all the efforts that is put by the district people, water is everybody's problem. The citizen has as much responsibility to come up with solutions as the other people. And there has been, the fact that we have an Orange County Water District or a Santa Clara Valley Water District, which are demonstrating superb integrated water management, are lessons in all these complaints that we make. We are slowly evolving towards adaptive management with learning to live with finite resource, and these are wonderful examples. And I think other countries, developing nations, which are in the throes of development, can not commit a lot of mistakes and start from a much higher level as they plan their water. These are superb education. And one of the most important parts, even this, as well as Santa Clara Valley Water District, I know, that public education, outreach in schools, this is an integral part of water management now. This human aspect is as important as water flowing from higher to lower elevation, how to manage it. And I think the fact that agencies such as yours are spending so much of time to bring this information to society, that confluence, science cannot anymore stand by itself and say, we are the experts, we solve all your problems, we know everything. Those days are gone. Nobody is an expert in everything. We have to learn to work together. That's where we are headed. Thank you very much for a very, very educated.
Thank you, my pleasure.